No Man's Sky's newest update is a complete game changer. The supercharged mechanic lets us buff our stats in ways that were never possible before. Pretty much everything from ships, multi-tools, and technology upgrades were buffed in the new update, and there's other goodies in there coming from the testing branch that I think we should check out in this video, because No Man's Sky is about to make a big turn for the better compared to how we started in update 4.0. Now, the biggest new addition still in its testing phase are the new supercharged slots. You can see these with their distinctive kind of like purple hue, and if you hover over them, you're going to notice that they mention the supercharged slot being active. Now, these will depend on your inventory size as well as the class of the ship or the multi-tool that you have. So the higher the class, the more tech slots you will have, like these, up to 4 for the maximum rank. The only exception to this rule is the exosuit. As long as you just have like 4 rows over there, you will get up to 4 of these slots as well. What makes these supercharged slots so amazing is that they can buff any tech you slot into them anywhere between 25 to over 500%. Of course, this will depend on the type of upgrade and its stats, but let's start with a few examples with the hyperdrive upgrade, which gets a 25% increase for the warp cell efficiency and the hyperdrive range. But this is, by the way, on top of the fact that these specific upgrades, as all other tech upgrades, have also been majorly buffed in the previous update across the board. So you're getting a lot more than what you were at the beginning of 4.0. In the example with the pulse engine upgrades, it goes a little bit more than that, but again, this depends on the stats, and the general rule that I notice is that the lower the stat is, the higher the increase is going to be. So while, for example, in this case, the dry fuel efficiency only gets a roughly 85% increase, the maneuverability gets over like 5 times of what it was by default after being supercharged. Similarly, boost also gets like more than double its initial stats. So this goes across the board with most of the other similar upgrades that have multiple stats that can range from lower to higher numbers. I think that this is going to make things a lot better for you in the new update, and it works for others too, like the Sentinel upgrades and pretty much everything else in between. Now, there's also the subject of the upgrade modules in your exosuit inventory. As I've said, as long as you have at least like 3 or maybe even 4 rows of tech upgrades or tech rows over here, you are going to get those 4 supercharged slots as well. I made a few comparisons with some of these like movement modules. In this case, these were also buffed in the new update, as we're gonna check in just a little bit. But when it's supercharged, again, these can get some nice bonuses over there. The higher the stat is, the lower the bonus is going to be, of only about 25% in the case of the jetpack tanks. But something like, for example, the initial boost power can get a massive 3x just from being supercharged, and the same goes with the recharge rate. If you were wondering if you can influence the placement of the supercharged slots in any way, no, that's not possible. You also cannot increase their number anywhere over 4, because that's the maximum you can get for a max rank ship, for example. I even fully upgraded its tech inventory, and it was still the same amount at the end of it, usually populated within the first 3 rows. Another big tip that I have for you here for these supercharged slots is that you should only put tech modules that feature stats on them to benefit from the supercharge. For example, if I were to put the basic hyperdrive in here, which doesn't feature any stats, it doesn't really benefit from it almost at all. Meanwhile, if I were to exchange it for the procedurally generated one, like this one that does feature stats, as you can see, there's an almost 100 hyperdrive range difference from the same setup, just with these 2 slots exchanged. Now, speaking of buffs, let's begin with the ships, because for the most part these were all buffed in one way or another, but some of them got more bonuses towards stats that kind of fit their theme. So for example, you will notice something like a fighter getting a massive bonus over there for the damage and maneuverability, but they also got a small increase over there in the shield strength. Meanwhile, the hyperdrive range remained pretty much unaffected. On the contrary, in the case of some of the exotic ships, all of their stats were well buffed across the board, with the biggest increase being for maneuverability, and then there was also a pretty nice bump for the damage. But don't take these stats at face value. These are just the stats before applying any upgrades, because it's not just the base values that were increased in the new update, also the scaling for different types of stats were increased as a result of 405, or whatever this update is going to be named. For example, if you were to take a fighter ship, it's going to scale much better with damage, and you will see much higher damage potential in the new update just from the fact that it's in that category. And similarly, something like an explorer will get a much higher bonus to, in this case, hyperdrive range than it did before. The benefit that you get from these changes is the fact that these ship categories, and even for the multi-tools, all of them have benefits that feel a lot more unique to their respective categories. So if you were to take a fighter ship, it's going to have much better bonuses towards damage. Meanwhile, something like an explorer will be just better at the hyperdrive range. And these differences are a lot more accentuated now in the new update, making these ships feel a bit more unique. In terms of the stats, as I've said, there are some really nice buffs across the board to all of the procedural tech, from the jetpack, hazard protection, pulse engine, hyperdrive upgrades, and even for the multi-tools. And these can be quite significant when you accumulate them on their own. If you pay attention to some of these stats, they only get a bump between 3 to 10% each. But when you factor in that they get to stack with each other, that you get to install multiple of them in the same category, maybe even apply the Sentinel upgrades that you get from them, so you can get up to 6 in total, you can get some really nice bonuses over there. Just to give you a quick example, with my multi-tool, it was just below 4,000 damage in the previous update, and now it's sitting close to 6,000 depending on the layout between this and the supercharged slot, without me having to install anything extra on top. It's just the same multi-tool being a lot better in that regard, and this is, by the way, not even fully upgraded. The same would go for pretty much everything else. So these are some really nice changes over there that I'm sure will please a lot of people that might have gotten mad following the nerfs that we had at the beginning of 4.0. Now there's a couple more changes coming, for example, to the difficulty setting, starting with the difficulty setting locker. You find this right here at the bottom in the new update, and if you activate this, it locks you in whatever the parameters you chose for your current preset. And this change is irreversible. You cannot get back to it. It will permanently lock your save file within those parameters. This would be most beneficial to anyone who wants to play with a default preset and never want to worry about accidentally bumping down or up the difficulty, and instead just locking themselves in how it was before update 4.0. This is also going in tune with some of the new UI changes, because you will notice that next to player names, there's now icons indicating their current difficulty setting, as well as an asterisk if that difficulty was bumped up or down. For some reason, some people care about this. If you don't want to see these, you can always just turn off either multiplayer, your character indicator, or maybe even turn off the text chat. But this totally helps people who, for example, play on the highest stakes, full permadeath, and want to have that recognition. This is a nice way to just show appreciation to somebody who's going the extra mile to just play the game on the most difficult environment. But totally let me know down below, do you like these changes? Would you like to see anything more added on top? In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.